So you're listening to the podcast that is called Life After Work, where four 50-year-olds who no longer are employed get together every week, most weeks, we've been away for a while, and talk about things that are going on in the world around us to try to bring some understanding and a little bit of common sense to proceedings. So my name's Rod Maxwell. 5 years ago, actually, at this time, I was lying in hospital with a brain tumor waiting to be operated on. And although it was successfully operated on by a great team at Salford Royal, I had to retire from work. And I find myself now doing things like this and talking to great people like these guys. So that's me. I'll go across to the storyteller.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good
I am
afternoon.
indeed the storyteller, Mr. P. A. Davis, author. It's good to be back with the podcast. We've not done it a few weeks. I was very fortunate enough to be on a cracking radio show just over a week ago. Radio Alti. Those want to see it, the podcast is live on all good download like Spotify and iTunes. So yeah, I'm pleased to be back. Pleased to be talking to you chaps again, although very disappointed that I missed out on the curry night when I was over there in the UK. But yeah, it's good to see you all again. It really is.
Very good.
Over to Incy. Phil.
Hi there. Good to be back. Yeah, having had a few weeks off, back into the grind now, albeit it's a very welcome grind of back to the training plan for next year now, and embarked on it again for the winter. And the band activities picking up as well. So my 3 life after work jobs have picked up again, my training, my banding, and of course, podcasting with you guys, which of course is the most enjoyable of the lot.
Of course.
So looking forward to discussing our current topics, having had a few weeks off. Ash.
Yeah, no, it's great to be back again. I've really missed our little chats. Well, not so little, our chats. It's been really good fun. And yeah, we had a good evening last Monday at the Everyman initially, and then we went out for a meal, had a curry. Yeah, Paul was definitely missed. So we'll have to do that another time. We'll have to reorganise it. You know.
Did we say we'd give him a mention for being so good to us, by the way? I can't remember.
Well, you know, the Everyman was actually very good, and then the Curry House were very accommodating because we were late, weren't we?
Yes, we lost track of time, didn't we? We thought we were in our podcast, didn't we? We just completely forgot about everything.
Yeah, there was no one to stop the recording, was there? So we carried on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it was the double tree on Stamford New Road. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
There you go. Excellent.
Very, very nice. He let us in. And then they didn't really massively rush us, did they? But the food was very good, wasn't it?
Yeah, so they can be our sponsors for today. There you go. So today's topic, we plan for weeks ahead, I'd like to tell you. But this morning we were going to talk a little bit about what life after work and retirement is like, and reflections maybe a year on from us starting this whole thing. But there's just a little thing that's come into the news and the papers over this last 24 hours called the Pandora Papers. And while we can't claim to be experts in this area, we thought we'd just have a little talk about what it is and what it might mean and how it's come about. Guys, my understanding of this is it's a bunch of documents that have been leaked, and there's this organization which seems to be like this international press organization have received them, and they're distributing this information out to a number of different news channels across the world, where in the UK it's the BBC, I think, and the Guardian, and it's something like 12 million papers or something that have been leaked, talking about basically the affairs of people across the world. Anybody know how this whole thing has originated at all?
I'm not sure. I don't know how it originated. The papers were released 3rd of October, weren't they? A couple of days ago. The first of the papers. And I can only imagine that this has been going on for a fair number of months while they collate all the documents. But it is one of those. It's because it's like, do you know what, gentlemen? It's the same old, isn't it? Every 10 or 15, 20 years, there's a huge scandal come out about people not so much evading but avoiding paying tax, and putting money into offshore accounts and anything they can to sort of avoid paying the taxes. So this is it's a lot bigger than of late, because if you remember a couple of years ago we had the whole thing about Starbucks not paying tax, and other big companies while they're in England not paying tax. But this goes beyond that. This isn't just your local Starbucks or a McDonald's or whatever. This is like countries and leaders within countries. King of Jordan has been mentioned. Various presidents in the Czech Republic, even our own politicians and past prime ministers have all been sort of revealed to have various offshore accounts and money that they're keeping away from the tax office. But it was a big question. Who is it? A disgruntled accountant that's not been paid? Is it somebody who's been kicked out of the secret world of this finance consortium? It really, and it, like you say, Rod, it's 12 million documents, which is equal to about 2.9 terabytes of data.
It's certainly going to be interesting when they start getting into the revelations, and you sense there'll be a drip feed of this now for a good time to come. And it's great. This stuff should be transparent. I think, Ash, you said it's the International, what was it?
Consortium of Investigative Journalists.
That's it. So to say they're behind it, they're the ones who seem to be collating this and then putting it into the public domain. But yeah, Paul, it's interesting as to where it's come from. Like you, I'm thinking it's just people. These transactions can't be kept totally secret. They have to go through banks. They have to go through people who deal with properties. Somewhere along the line, there's going to be people prepared to reveal this stuff, as they should. If there's illegality, but even where something, as you say, isn't I forget which word you use now, but isn't right. It's a bit shabby for someone in the public eye who's saying one thing, doing another. That's an issue of public interest. And I think I'll try not to go on too long. I'll make a couple of basic points. I think one is that if you've got, if you make yourself wealthy and then go into politics and achieve a position of power, I have no problem with that. But I have an issue when it's the other way around, that you get into a power and as a result of that, you are able to enrich yourself because of that position of power. And you've got the whole spectrum there, from Russian oligarchs to the Blairs. And I'm hasten to add there, I don't think they've done anything illegal. But when he was on a podium spouting that it'll be taxes, not offshore havens, and he'll act on it. And okay, a good while later, but it's the same guy who's now been seen to buy a property in an offshore account company name so that he can not evade, but avoid paying taxes. Good job he's not involved, well, I'm saying in UK politics anymore, because he should be right out on his ear for that. And he shouldn't have any credibility left, not at least for some of the other stuff he's done since. But Jimmy Carr was on sorry to put those two together, but he was on a sticky wicket, and he knew it because he's a public figure who relies on the support of the public in one way or another. And so do politicians. And he knew he had to be contrite, come clean, pay the money back. Otherwise he was finished. And Blair should be the same. Unless he puts that right, he'd say he should be finished. I know he's not in UK politics anymore, but he's still trying to be a statesman on the world stage. And he's just sharp.
Well, it is. I mean, I think I agree. I mean, just reading from one of the articles that I said, it's 600 journalists from 117 countries. So it's very widespread, very concerted. It's a major trawl through of 14 sources for many, many months. So there's a incredibly motivated scheme going on here to find this out. So we'd love to know what this motivation is, what they're trying to do. I think I'm hoping it's the altruistic view, in the sense that they're trying to highlight what big business and what power and politics does. Because, like you just said, Phil, it's the hypocrisy of it all, because they're going on about, over the COVID year and a half or so, they said this needs to be paid for, taxes need to go up, this has to happen, we need to fund this, that, and the other. What they're actually saying, from looks of it, taxes need to go up for us. For anyone else who can avoid this and have the wherefore they can avoid it, it's absolutely okay. For us to actually, be bled dry, it's fine. But they do not need to pay for this at all. It just stinks. It's just absolute hypocrisy. It just doesn't sit well. Then you'll get, politicians from abroad, then you're looking at, nefarious politics. I'm not going to go into who they are, but various nefarious politicians from abroad in very dubious countries. They're actually using offshore accounts to invest in the London market and invest in other properties as well. And we can't actually point fingers at them, but we can now. So again, there's just a complete lack of transparency and honesty in all this as well, because on one hand, they're actually telling us, we need to pay taxes, everything needs to be funded, but clearly that rule doesn't apply for those that have the power, does it?
The thing about this whole Pandora thing for me is that I don't think the information per se or the message it brings out is particularly new, right? I mean, the specific examples might be, but the fact that you have these people who on one hand spout principles about how we should live, and on the other hand are actually, doing things with finances that are not completely above board, not necessarily always illegal, but not necessarily ethical in a way. That's. But for me, what's really interesting about this is it's apparently, I'm just looking. There's excellent information on the BBC website, but apparently it's the biggest data leak of its type, and 14 companies that provide offshore services are the sources of the information. So 14 companies have been hacked, essentially, possibly, or somebody from those organizations have offered up this information. But interestingly, there's very little on the US. And that's because of those 14 companies, not many of them are in, I think, the Cayman Islands, where a lot of the US personalities, politicians, etc., put their money. So it's very global, but not actually very US specific. But for me, I think it's more the fact that it might have the effect of saying to people, you know what, we're in an information age now where you think your information is secure, you think you can keep secrets from people, but actually that's not the case. And what people are looking for is a more ethical, more fair society where people cannot take their wealth and essentially gain unfair benefits because of it, and that's what's going on here. There is a class in this world. I think I felt that in this country there's a class of people who seem to get away with stuff more, and who have their fingers on the button, but that's on a global basis. And I think one of the good things that this does is it uncovers the fact that it's not a fair society. There are people who get unfair benefits, and it may not be completely illegal, but it's not ethical at the same time. And you can't be getting gratitudes of the public, knighthoods or whatever, in one way, and be doing something that's unethical in another way. It just isn't fair. It doesn't work that way. And for me, that's what this does. But I don't know what's going to happen with it.
I agree, Rod. I'll link it to something I've mentioned before, but it's interesting to see what happens now. But there was this bill that went through Parliament recently. I think it's gone through now, where if you it could apply to journalists. If you reveal something, publicize something that could be embarrassing to the government, then you could be subject to imprisonment. Certainly you'd be committing a crime. Could this fall under that banner? If there's something in there that it attaches to a government minister, could this be deemed embarrassing to the government and therefore they are committing a crime by revealing it? That would be shocking if it does. I know I'm speculating, but it's the kind of thing that worried me when that bill was going through, that it might curb the powers that people have to reveal information that is legitimate public interest, like this stuff we're talking about. So I think we should keep an eye on that as this thing goes on.
Public interest and governmental embarrassment are often go hand in hand anyway, don't they?
Absolutely, as they should be.
The thing about it is that you can't avoid that. They need to be held to account. I don't know if any current ministers are involved in this, I don't know. But the point is, you know, it is good that this has been aired and it has been published. But I think Rod was just saying, you know, oh, what do we do with this now? Where does this lead? Can it lead to changes? I don't think it will. I mean, all we can go is talk, shake our heads and move on. But is that what's going to happen?
The thing is, that's what will happen. That's what will happen. You know, it comes up. The trouble with these things, they come out into the public and everyone's in uproar. There's a couple of things. I'm quite. There's a very mixed or divided bag of statements from the various countries that are involved. Some are, very few are saying, yes, this will be investigated and we'll find out what's happening and there'll be legal action taken, where the majority have immediately gone on the back foot and say, this is just slanderous. This is a means to try and bring our government down. This is totally not the truth. Czech Republic, I think it was, that somebody's only done this because we're having a major election and it's to oust the current prime minister or president or whatever. So there's a lot really back on the back foot. Just a quote from a gentleman named Robert Silverman, who's from Oxfam, America. Now, this was about the American thing, which just sums up this whole situation. The Pandora Papers is a damning reminder that the United States has two separate tax systems, one for the uber rich and well-connected, and one for everybody else. And unfortunately, gentlemen, today's world, that's how it has always been. And it's only through these leaks that we realise, you know, the fact, how's it going to change I'll say normal person's life, those who work and do whatever, how's it going to change their life? It's not going to change their life. People will be saying you need to be more accountable for the money you've got offshore, but like we said, it's not illegal to put money into an offshore account and avoid tax. Evading tax is a different matter. But you know, there'll be this hoo-ha and it'll be in papers on the news for how many weeks, and it's like, but what are you going to do? How will it change?
Well, I think you're quite right, Paul, and that is the question to ask. And maybe I'm being a bit too simplistic to say, can we not make it illegal to use offshore? There should be no such thing as offshore, should there? It's so obviously a tax. The word is just synonymous with legal tax evasion. I know that's a contradiction in terms, but it's a means to avoid paying taxes that doesn't commit a crime. It should be made illegal. And you know, we have the Channel Islands, we have the Cayman Islands, even the Isle of Man. These things shouldn't be allowed. There's no way they can claim, oh, we're a separate government and have separate tax regimes, and they wouldn't survive on that basis. People said, well, we're not dealing with you then.
The problem is it's one for all and all for one, right? Because the problem is if the UK were to take a stand and say that we will not allow people who are citizens of the UK to put money into offshore accounts. There's a bunch of people who have wealth in this country who will then find themselves another passport, another country to move to, and we will lose that money. And
you know what, Rod? I know there'll be a price to pay, but I'd say go on then. You know, we become a country with integrity. We don't need these people.
That's very thin ice we're walking on there if we do that, because in my mind, I don't know if it's the view of everybody else, this country isn't run by politicians. It's run by the uber rich who have got so much money and throw that money at the government. They can control how policies are in this country. And it's a sad state of affairs. If the billionaires take the money out of this country, our economy could collapse.
So what you're saying is then we have to accept it and we just carry on being these slaves to taxation and being looked it over. There's got to be another way.
No, I know, and we shouldn't accept it. But like I've said, we'll be outraged, we'll be in uproar, we'll go on people will say, this is terrible, terrible. It won't change because of the money that's in. We're not talking of a few pounds here. We're talking of billions and billions of dollars that are being ploughed into this country by the uber rich. And whether the politicians come out and admit that's happening or not, it's a clear case that it is happening. You know, people are buying massive houses on a politician's wage.
It's also people's jobs. This is part of the problem. Is if the UK takes a stand and says, actually, if you are a resident or company in this country, all you can't have any overseas tax accounts, right? All the money has to be within the UK. What will happen is some of these companies will choose not to headquarter here. They'll choose not to use the UK as a base. Yeah, I know, Phil, but I mean, we've got enough of that with, for example.
Thank you, Amazon. Goodbye. We'll buy from shops who do pay their taxes. And
I totally understand, but it's not just about us buying; it's about jobs for people, and it's a heck of a big gamble to take that ethical line on your own, right? You need a pack of people to do it with.
Agreed. It would be better to be done with international backing, and to be fair, there are moves. Europe, that institution we've decided to turn our back on. We're acting with us to try and do this, and at least we've moved to the idea of a minimum global rate of corporation tax. So I don't know if that is a first step to abolishing these tax havens, these low tax headquartering practices. But I am being simplistic, I know, but I think we've got to start making these moves where if Amazon doesn't pay these taxes, then before Amazon came and employed loads of people on 0 hours contracts in warehouses, people had proper jobs in smaller bookshops and smaller toy shops and a host of other things. I don't think that those jobs just disappear. They will reappear somewhere else.
Well, you're right, Bill, because if you look at Amazon itself, it is it's a highly profitable business. A big chunk of its market share is based in the United Kingdom. They do make a lot of money. They would not want to do any kind of business or financial suicide by leaving these shores and go somewhere else, because they're going to need the warehousing, they're going to need the accountancy services that they've got there. They've got servers here in this country, so they're not going to leave. They can't just close down their warehouses and this, that, and the other, because they'll just forego all this profit.
Yeah, they don't, but at the moment, and I'm not very knowledgeable about this in detail, but as I understand it, the large percentage of revenue that Amazon makes in the UK sits with a non-UK based organization, which I think might be registered.
Well, and this is what should be outlawed. This
that's what I'm saying.
People could vote with their feet, because I get really annoyed by that, right? But just in the time we've started this podcast, there's been a delivery from Amazon to our door, and it really annoys me, all right? And then I don't stop buying from Amazon, and they're only one example, but I don't because it's convenience, it's ease, and
no, Ron, what I'm saying is not banning Amazon. What I'm saying is forcing them to relocate back onto these shores. That's all, because it's in their interest and our interest. They're not going to just say, right, if you make us relocate into this country, we're going to leave.
Well, it's not even about relocating something. All it is changing the law to say, and I think they are changing this, or intend to, that you've got to pay taxes on the revenue where the purchase is made. You can't do this double shuffle where it's two separate companies, and it's the profit is made in a different jurisdiction and territory. Where the sale is made, where the purchase is made, rather, shall we say, that's where the tax should be paid. So I think it's, hopefully not being too simplistic, but it's relatively simple to say, no, that's what's going to happen. That should ensure that, and this is only one aspect of it, that should ensure that this is dealt with better. I was going to pick up on one other aspect about property. The property's here, and that ain't going to go anywhere. And I think we're seeing is sky-high property prices. I pity anybody now trying to get a property in the UK. So why is that? It's because of very wealthy people buying second homes and foreign investment. I don't know why democracy isn't working on a lot of these issues, because it is a very small number of people with significant wealth, and they have this impact on a large majority. So I don't know why democracy shouldn't solve this thing if somebody puts up policies that will serve the many rather than these few. How does that not happen?
The problem with it is that we abide by a rule of a free market economy, and it's a rule of supply and demand, and therefore that seems to be controlling the market. I mean, I'm astounded that apparently in Manchester at the moment, rent is going through the roof. the availability of rental property, despite the fact that there's more and more flats in Manchester than ever before, is really low. So rental rates are flying at the moment in the city. Now, you could turn around and say, well, that's actually because this, I think it got voted the third best city in the world or something the other week. But the problem is, if you live in a free market economy, as a government, you can't. It's very difficult to start dipping your toe in to try to control it, because actually they're not very good at doing it. They'll probably cock it up and they'll unwind it.
I don't think it is that difficult. We've seen, and I think the evidence of there is, I'm a capitalist, but I'm not because I think there's no better system fundamentally, but it can't be unfettered, unreconstructed capitalism, because at the core of capitalism is consumption and greed. If you stop and break it down, it's this idea that you've got to make money for the shareholders and you've got to get bigger all the time. And that's your only raison d'etre. So, and that leads to greed and corruption, as we've been, where we started out with this. So you've got to, I'm very much a supporter of a government's role is to fetter capitalism. It is to involve itself in markets. And you only have to look at the banking crisis of 2008, was it? You only have to look at furlough scheme. Conservative governments are quite prepared to intervene in markets when it goes belly up and protect business. So the idea that government doesn't have a role to play in free market economies is absolute nonsense. They're essential. They're absolutely essential.
But the fettering process, like you said there, Phil, the fettering process has got to be equitable. So whereby the population is taxed and we perceive that taxation to be fair. And it hurts, we've all worked through our lives up to the age of we all have to retire. We got taxed, we did it, we paid it in the understanding that is going to be applied fairly, universally, everywhere else. And now we're getting papers which are given to us, which are telling us that isn't actually the case. All these taxation that we've had paid in our lives is not being applied fairly. We're getting gigantic behemoth companies who are paying nothing, and it's not fair. It's ridiculous. And then what we need to do is just say, because don't forget, as you say, as a product of capitalism, these companies need us as well. How do you think they get their profits? How do you think Amazon makes this money? It's us. So if they want to leave these shores and go somewhere else, off you go. But they won't do that, because what they're going to have to do is relocate back into this country and say, we will tax you fairly like everyone else. That's not too much to ask for.
Well, I think sometimes our government needs to have a little bit more confidence in itself.
Exactly.
And play that game a little bit, because I look at it and think, yes, Amazon have become, and again, this is only one company, but
Google, Facebook, all the same.
Exactly. These sort of very international, transient sort of companies that can come into a market and they benefit the market, but they also take revenue, but they're not necessarily resident in this country from a corporation point of view. But I just don't think we're in a position where I think these organizations have almost got too big. And I think that's part of what's behind this type of investigation in these Pandora papers, is that I think what the journalists involved in this are trying to actually illustrate that there are things going on that go beyond society and things that we don't see. And that there are groups of people who are benefiting over and above the lawful citizens of any country, and they get advantages. They get advantages because of their power, their connection, the amount of money they have. And I think that's what this is actually trying to bring out. I'm just looking here again, it's on the BBC website, that a chap called Fergus Shield, who's the managing editor of the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, and he's just said it's too early to predict the impact of this. But he said a number of authorities in Czech Republic, Panama, India, Estonia, Mexico, Spain, and Brazil have already promised investigations. But at the same time, the ICIJ are facing really real attacks by others, so there'll be countries who'll go on the attack and try to stop the leaks. So I don't think they even know what the impact of this will be, but this little quote ends by saying the sad reality is the secret economy is booming. And I think that's the part of this is there's actually a secret society. It's not just a secret economy. There's a secret society out there that sits above. I've said it so many times, but sits above democracy. There are people with unfair advantage, invisibly, not no transparency, and they sit above countries, governments. They have more power, and this is just another example of that.
I mean, the sad reality here is that, Rod, you just said they're more concerned with trying to stop the leaks than they are looking at the information coming out. That's what their biggest concern is.
See, what I don't understand is all the governments that say there's going to be full investigation into these matters, blah 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 blah. It's the governments that more or less invented these tax-paying loops that you can get round. They've made it where you can go to an offshore account and not pay any tax. And so I really don't know what.
Why do they need to investigate what they created? They should know.
Exactly.
And I'm sure they do.
But they'd be like, yes, who invented this system? We did, sir. What? Yeah.
Yes, Minister, isn't it?
It'll probably be Lord Farquhar about 70 years ago, who basically did it as a vested interest. And then all of his pals basically agreed to it. That's what it is, obviously. It's laws basically made to carry on avoiding tax forever. That's what they want, isn't it?
It's that idea, as they see it. I think there's an idea that taxes are fundamentally wrong, and I think I take your position, Ash, that no, we should be happy to pay our taxes. All we want to see is that they're fair. We understand if you want street lighting, if you want an NHS, if you want social care, we're going to have to pay more. I don't have a problem with that.
It's an obvious thing. If your house is on fire, you want a fire engine there, don't you?
Yeah, but
it's how it's done.
But this is the difference. The people who are in control of these economies, of how this money is, they don't sit in the UK and care about the UK health system. They sit in a different jurisdiction, and they're only actually selfishly interested in themselves, and they have access to buy whatever they want to buy for whatever price they want to buy it. And fundamentally, too many of them don't have a care in the world about citizenship or the legacy their company might leave for people. They just really care. It's greed at the end of the day. It's all about greed.
I think the biggest thing is just that they're in this bubble. They're in this bubble where reality isn't actually sinking into them. I don't know if you saw that report with, was it Rees Mogg? There was this guy with cerebral palsy. He lost his job, and he was trying to explain the best he could about what had happened. His job's gone, and Rees Mogg he didn't seem to understand what was going on. And this guy was desperately trying to explain to him what his job meant to him, why it's gone, how much the £20 is going to mean to him. And you should have seen the bewilderment on this politician's face.
He just didn't know what to do, did he?
He didn't comprehend what was going on. There was no empathy. There was no feeling for this person at all. It was just it was very, very bizarre.
But do you not think this is a bit like history repeating itself? Like, we're going back to almost Edwardian Victorian times, when you had lords and masters of big estates who treated their workers, maybe some of them maybe quite well, some of them not so well, but they were so far away from where these people's lives were, they had no way of understanding it. And we think that society has leveled up. It hasn't at all. It's just gone off on another astronomical scale.
If you're looking at being fellowship to another human being, it shouldn't be based on a whim. It should be based upon the fact that you have earned that. That is your right. So when these companies and people think they don't have to pay tax, that says a lot about our society now. Like you said, but we should be paying tax and be happy for that at the end of the day. Obviously, I don't want to come across as being weird. I'm happy to pay tax. Obviously, it hurts. What I'm saying, they're necessary, aren't they? Yeah. And anything we have, any goodwill we have toward each other, shouldn't be based on whims. They should be based upon the fact that, you know, you should expect that from other people. Anyway.
But do you think it you know, because we could say from our positions that, you know, we feel that, you know, paying taxes is the right thing to do because it's your contribution to society. It goes back in, it pays for things, etc. And you get enough through education and, Christ, I know through the health service, you know, what that gives you back. So you invest in it. But do you think there comes a time where you have so much money and you get so diluted and you lose your sphere of reference where you actually think, well, actually, I don't care about all that anymore. You know, I care about something completely different, and that doesn't become your it's no longer an important principle because you're so far away from that. I don't understand how that works, personally speaking.
Well,
me neither.
I'll put this question to you, gentlemen, as I would do to the UK public, the average working man and woman. You get your paycheck, you get your wage slip as we used to do, and we looked at it and we see this, oh, look at the tax they're taking off me, blah, 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 blah. If someone came to you and said, gentlemen, I know a way that's legal that you never have to pay tax again, would you take it? Would you take that? Would you do it? Or would you say, no, I want to continue paying tax?
I think I'd want to, because that's the Jimmy Carr thing, isn't it? Basically, and that's what they all do. I think what I do is, and I'll link this back to an answer Rod gave earlier about Amazon, is I'd actually try and publicize that loop, because it would be a loophole, because society would cease if everybody found that way of avoiding paying tax. Is you'd shout about it and say, this can't be right. This should be illegal, which is what we're talking about when people find these ways out that should be illegal. So that would be my answer. That,
but it's not.
I take your point. And so I said I'd link it back to what Rod was saying. You shouldn't be ashamed about buying something from Amazon because that's a futile gesture. That's not going to change the world. You not buying something from Amazon. That's just penalising yourself because they do offer a good service at a good price, etc. And I don't think it's hypocritical to be buying something from Amazon and yet shouting about saying, but the system should be wrong. You can make the gesture if you want, but it makes no difference if you say, I'll boycott Amazon. I think that's going to bother them. So it's about acting collectively.
You don't know how much comes into our house, but yes. Well, no, I understand your point. I do understand your point.
So I think the key, Paul, is acting collectively. Because yes, you might feel entitled in not such an extreme thing. I think we are all entitled to, oh yeah, if I can pay a bit less tax, because and there are absolutely legitimate things you can do to pay less tax. You can contribute to a pension that saves you paying tax in your working life. They're there for a reason. That's the government's put that there. Various governments have supported
the difference there, Phil, that's available to everyone. That's the thing. Everyone knows about it. It's well publicized, and we have access to it. No one has access to this.
Okay, I'll reword my question. So you get your pay slip. Some guy comes out and says, look, I've got a legal way you can stop paying tax forever. You never have to pay tax again, but you can't tell anybody about it.
And that's the thing. No, I would tell, because that is what we're talking about. It's this idea that no, then you become one of those the where you're in on that.
And then, like you said, society would fall apart then, wouldn't it?
And there we go. There you have your leak of the Pandora papers. Yes. It's Phil.
It was me.
And you know how it came out? Because you had some clever dick like Paul trying to worm it out of you, and he did it again.
The point I'm making here is we can all, as the majority of the public will do, they'll stand on the high horses and say, this is wrong, why doesn't it happen to me? Unfortunately, the human nature is such that if people were offered that deal where they could save tax, not pay, they would take it in a nutshell.
But Paul, you look then at a system like the US where you might pay less tax fundamentally, but then you've got to pay for services like health, for example. And I as someone who, goodness knows how much brain surgery costs on the NHS, but I think it's a lot of money. I just think to myself, if I had been in the US, I would have still probably been okay because I would have had health insurance cover that. But not everybody's going to have that luxury, and everybody should be able to access fundamental health. So I look at it and think, I don't mind the whole approach for taxation, because at the end of the day, if you're doing very well, you pay more, but that's fine because you're doing well. That's the fundamental point of it, and and you're supporting society in a way as well.
Here's the final question then, and it's in two parts. So what do you think, first part, what do you think the effect of this is going to be? And what would you like to see happen because of this? So what do you think is going to happen, and what would you like to see happen as a result of this?
Well, I think basically, I mean, the first part of the question is, I think nothing is going to happen apart from you'll get lots of criticism from governments around the world as to how, get the wrong end of the stick. Just say, how did these leaks happen? We got hacked, not looking at the real problem at all. And then what should happen? Well, I mean, we alluded to it before, Phil was going on about, tax havens, start closing them down. But does that cause another? See, I don't know enough about accountancy and finance markets and that sort of thing, how easy that to do and what the knock-on effects are. So I don't know if that's too simplistic, but I would, whatever the avenues they were to actually avoid, for example, stamp duty on a 18.5 million tax stamp duty on a mansion, they've obviously avoided that. That's a lot of money that disappeared. So are there ways of closing these loopholes down? Find out the loopholes, tighten them up and close them off. That's what they really need to do.
I think there should be I don't know. The cynic in me thinks like Ash that maybe not a lot will happen. It depends what specific revelations do come out and how outrageous they are. But yes, the cynic in me thinks, will the world fundamentally change? Not sure. What I'd like to see, as Ash says, these things closed down. I thought there was a move at some point where there was an offence to break the intention of a tax law, i.e. the very idea of a loophole becomes suspect in itself if you have been seen to create something artificial with the purpose of not paying a tax that you would otherwise pay. That I thought was to be made more, potentially made illegal. I'm not sure about that. But there should be moves along that side. The accountants should be made to, if they've got a scheme that will reduce or avoid them paying tax on something that was previously taxable, I think they should have to submit that to the Inland Revenue and say, is this okay, guys? You've got to disclose.
They do. I mean, that's the difference between a tax scheme that is ethical. I think there's two different terms, but essentially your typical accountants would be able to say, is it legal to do X, Y, and Z? Or
what the HMRC should immediately do is say, oh, you found a loophole there, and shut it immediately.
But they're always chasing their tails.
But what I'm saying is that it should be a prerequisite, a company, before they can benefit from something like that, and then tell them after, or wait till HMRC finds out, because, oh, where's all your tax suddenly gone? It's no, you've got to submit it in advance and say, we're thinking about doing this. Can we do it? Is it legal? Yes, it is illegal, but we don't like it because it seems like a bit of a loophole there. We haven't thought of that one. Change it and say, there you go, it's now illegal. You can't.
It's interesting. Just following the BBC thread, and they're asking the question, what will the real impact of this be? And there's a chap called James Oliver from BBC Panorama, and he says, too early to say, but he said previous leaks have had an impact. So, for example, stashing your money offshore to evade tax in the UK is harder than it was 10 years ago when we did an undercover investigation of offshore source service providers in the UK. So he's basically saying, these things in the past have had an impact. You probably don't realize it, but it has changed laws. It has changed things. There's another chap called Fergus Shield, who's the managing director or editor of this group of international investigators, and he's saying, what was the point and what will it prove? And he said, this isn't simply about alleged criminality. The offshore system offers secrecy, which provides an opportunity to hide assets from authorities, creditors, and other claimants, as well as public scrutiny. And the system allows wealthy people to follow another country's financial regulations while not requiring them to live there. That's the thing that has to change, basically. That's my view. He didn't say that. The offshore financial system, he goes on to say, can drain trillions from treasuries, worsen wealth disparity, and protect those who cheat and steal while depriving their victims of recourse. And he goes on to say, studies have estimated that the world's ultra wealthy own the bulk of the $11 trillion realm of offshore companies. $11 trillion, right? And they say the world's ultra wealthy own that. More than 130 billionaires on the Forbes magazine list turn up in the Pandora papers. 130 billionaires on the Forbes magazine.
And that's why, Rod, it won't change, because the major government donors are the people who are on this Pandora paper, aren't they? They're the main people. The people who are donating to the governments are the paymasters. So it's vested interest. How are you going to change anything when your major donor for any political party is the one on the list?
So he says, just to confirm, he says more than 130 billionaires is a lot of people, right? All right.
Yeah.
On the Forbes magazine list, turn up on the Pandora papers. More than a dozen of those billionaires, so a dozen of the 130, have faced serious questions regarding the sources of their wealth, typically arising from those offshore assets. So, I mean, that suggests that they've been getting away from it for some time. But it's interesting, and you know, for me, I think the good thing about it is I thought for a while that the media industry was a bit too complicit in what was going on, and not actually challenging enough, not doing its job of holding people to account, being investigative, and actually this would suggest
finally,
finally.
I think generally that statement would have been often true, but finally, here's something. Here's one then. That why wouldn't it be an easy and positive thing to do to say any property in the UK has to be owned very transparently by an individual resident in the UK or a company registered in the UK and doing its business in the UK? Would that be difficult, and thereby ensuring that all proper stamp duties, income tax on rentals, etc., etc.?
What about those that bring in income from other companies by holiday homes, for example?
So what situation there? Sorry, Paul.
I'm saying if somebody, for example, from France, lives in France most of the year in France, buys a holiday home in the UK but isn't a resident of the UK. I would
super tax it, because property, there isn't enough of it in the UK and probably in many other countries for the residents of that country. It is not suitable to be an investment avenue for somebody's profit outside the UK. It's just not suitable. You can go buy shares if you want to invest. It's not about investment when people are looking for places to live, and this is driving up prices. That would be my view.
Well, I'll tell you what, guys.
And if you've got the money to say, well, I want this holiday home, this I'm talking about second homes here, that if you can afford that, and as part of the taxes you pay, it ensures that there's some positive benefit put back into the property market in the place you're buying
via the taxation.
Via taxation.
Yeah.
I haven't thought this through entirely, of course, but it's a starter for 10.
Yeah.
It started as a question. Would it be a simple and positive thing to do?
I mean, the good thing is, like you said, these Pandora papers have got us thinking, and it's got us discussing the problem and the issue. So there's no hiding place anymore now. That's brilliant, isn't it? That's a start.
Totally.
Yeah, I was just thinking as we started this, one of you guys mentioned, or I might have mentioned, how it got leaked. But then I started thinking throughout the conversation, have senior ministers not left paperwork in cafe tables.
Yes.
Or got out the cars with things revealed on it, or
Yeah.
you know, they get very complacent, don't they?
No, this is a group of people getting access to the systems of these offshore companies, or being granted access to these companies somehow, you know, and you know, it'll embarrass those offshore financial institutions massively that they've seemed to have been hacked, or they've been somehow somebody has managed to get access. But this is not, I don't think, anything related to people being able to hack into a government. I think somehow they've managed to get into a bunch of, I think it was 14 international financial institutes that they've managed to get into somehow.
The trouble is, whoever has leaked this or hacked into a system, if they're found out, they'll be suddenly found of having committed suicide in a woods somewhere.
Well, do you know what, Paul? That's
yeah, absolutely.
Sounds far-fetched, doesn't it? But no,
it's not far-fetched at all. It's just, yeah, God.
Yeah. Look at the guy. Look at the guy who said there was no weapons of mass destruction in Iran.
Yeah,
he suddenly committed suicide.
Wow. Yeah, that was the most bizarre of all, wasn't it? Forgotten his name now, but
yeah, I know who you mean, though. Yeah, definitely.
I said at the time. I remember saying at the time, "Oh my God, he will end up dead." And
within days,
lo and behold, a week later, because he'd opened his mouth and called out the Blairs of this country and said, "You're lying," essentially. That was the end of his life.
Dr. David. Oh. Anyway,
that's why we have Google. Even there you go. So, well, look, gentlemen, interesting start back to the new season of Life After Work. We might get round to next week talking about sort of our views on life after work a year on, and what would we. I wanted to suggest we could provide some practical advice to somebody that we should say, if you're retiring early, what should you think about? So maybe that's a topic we can take into next week.
Good topic.
Okay, well, good. Well, I feel a wee bit safer on that one and more knowledgeable than I do on the Pandora papers. But there you go. That was a very high level view of the Pandora papers. That's a new breaking news story this week.
We'll be a bit more relaxed next week. We just obviously needed to get a lot off our chest.
Yeah, obviously, I felt as though there's a soapbox on here in here, so when I stood on it virtually all through that. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm just going to transfer my money out from the Cayman Islands.
Yeah, better get mine back on shore.
I saw you typing away, going sell. Okay, speak to you next week, guys.
Have a great week, guys. See you now.
See you guys.